Good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a hearty welcome to the Voice of the Cape's Matric online revision session. We have with us today Danielle Pretorius, who is the facilitator for this afternoon, and she's representing Futures Academy SA's online high school. And the subject that we will be covering in today's session is business studies. Good day, Danielle, and welcome once again.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, take us through today's session. What can our students expect in today's session on business studies?
As you'll remember, last week we started with covering examination skills. And then what we're going to do today is we're going to look at paper one content and then apply those examination skills to that.
Okay, so paper one today, and yes, so hopefully next week when we have you back, we'll cover paper two. And do
Yes.
note that this is a live session. However, it will remain on the Voice of the Cape's YouTube and Facebook platform, so you can always go back to these lessons and go through whatever information was shared. So I'll hand over to you, Danielle, to proceed. All the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, hi everyone. You will remember that last week we were chatting about the examination skills, and this week we're gonna more look at the paper one content, and then taking those examination skills we learned last week and using the content of the paper one and then applying those so you guys can see how the content and the examination skills fit together, particularly for the paper one. So, in terms of your business studies, like I said last week, it's split up into a paper one and a paper two, just to rehash. Your topics are also split that way. And in terms of the scope for the paper one and the paper two, what you'll note is that the paper one is a total of 5 topics for business environments and business operations. So you have 3 topics under business environments. You have macro environment, impact of recent legislation on business. That's the topic with all of the acts. Then you have macro environment, business strategies, and then the business sectors and their environments, primary, secondary, tertiary, all of that. And then in terms of your business operations, there's only 2 topics. The first being the human resources function, and the second being quality of performance. However, when it gets to the paper two, you have 5 topics on each side, so 10 topics in total. So, in terms of content, the paper one is really an opportunity for you to score highly. And since you only have so much content to study, you can really try and score a higher mark in your paper one. So whereas here, 5 topics under business ventures and 5 topics under business roles, um, the paper one is much less. What I want to point out with the business operations section is that there are only 2 topics. What this means is that in terms of your essay question, you know it's going to be on either the human resources function or quality of performance or mixture. Generally, they prefer to do one or the other. So in that case, because you have to pick just one essay, you can choose to study the human resources function really well or the quality of performance really well to the point that you can write a whole essay on it. What I want to point out with the content today as well, in terms of your essay, is that in business studies, it's very different from, for example, a history essay or like an English essay, in that even with the history essay, where there's certain facts you have to say, it leaves a lot more interpretation for the marker. With the business studies, there's a certain particular way they want you to say things and specific content that they want you to give that's in your curriculum and in your syllabus. So there isn't a lot of room for interpretation. What that means is it's a lot of memorization work rather than like understanding work, if that makes sense. You still need to understand it because you will be asked to apply it to scenarios, but you need to memorize it as well because they want specific content that you need to know. So, starting with the paper one, the business environment section covers what you've been doing in grade 10 and 11, and now in grade 12. Your micro, market, and macro environment, you'll see it's featured here again. And then the business operations is just the daily operations of the business, hence the HR function and the quality of performance. In grade 10 and 11, I believe you did the marketing function and the production function. So, kind of finishing that off with the human resources function. What you will note is that here, in terms of the content for paper one, is that even though it's two topics, it's still not that much work. So what I've done for the business operations, we're using, well, the notes that I would recommend that you use is the WCD notes that they have given. So I can't stress how well these work because they align so closely to the memo. So you'll see that they're given out by the department. And if you go through the memos of the past question papers, you will see that the memo almost regurgitates what's written here in these notes. What's particularly nice about these notes as well is that they give the heading and then they give how they would ask the question. So if you get this question, this is what you say. And that's why I find these notes particularly helpful. They're available on the Western Cape Education Department website as well. So when going through these, remember that these notes are separated by terms. So just going over how you will use these to study, or just your notes to study. So they're divided by terms, and note that your paper one and paper two content is not divided by terms. So you will see that it doesn't follow that the paper one is term one and two, and the paper two is term three and four. You'll see here in the paper two, they have a term one topic. So it's important that you split the work or just note to yourself which topics fall under each and which ones you need to study, because it won't be that you study the whole term one packet. From the term one packet, only the business operations, and then from the term three packet, the second one, the team performance, or the quality of performance, sorry. So what I've done is I've joined them into one here in the topic notes. So in total, for the half of the paper, the business operations section, it's only 19 pages, and that's both of them. So that means that you have an opportunity to be very strategic about how you study. Note that you still need to study the business environment because you still have to answer a question on that in your section B, but only really in your paper one, because of the paper two having more topics, can you do this strategically. So this is what I would do is for my essay is I would focus on one of the business or study both of the business operations topics, because you don't know which one you're going to get as your essay question. Also, both will be asked in section B. So you have an opportunity to do really well studying the business operations and then also focusing on the legislation here. So what I want to point out in terms of a past paper is you will note that in the paper one section, business environments, they really like asking the legislation, even in the section B, but a lot of times they will ask a certain act as an essay question. So to illustrate, so here's last year's NSC exam, paper one. And let's take a look at the essay question. So you'll see business environments, legislation. So they indicate to you the topic they want you to discuss. You'll see here the business operations one was quality of performance. Here they ask you about the Labor Relations Act. If we look at the 2021 paper, or the May-June 2021 paper, Here we have a question on business strategies, and then again, quality of performance. And then here again, we have legislation, but now we have the National Credit Act and then the human resources function. So with there being, I think, almost 9 or 10 acts you need to memorize, and they could ask you for 40 marks to discuss one act. I think it's more strategic to go with the two options of either the human resources function or the quality of performance, particularly because that's just the legislation. Then it's still the business strategies and the business sectors. So what I want to look at is we'll start with the section B, and then for today's class, I want to go through the business operations section so that you can see how you should study with the notes and then utilize that going forward with the business environment section when you're studying these. Essentially, because we won't have enough time in today's class to cover the whole business environment section, we may be able to cover the whole business operations section. And it's more about teaching you the skills of applying the content to the paper as well, and then fostering study skills, specifically for business studies. So in our section B, you will see that the way the questions are structured is you will have one question. Your question 2 will be business environments. Your question 3 will be business operations. And your question 4 will be a miscellaneous topic. So what that means is that they ask questions on both business environments and business operations. So do not underestimate your reading time. Your reading time is really important because you need to decide what questions you're going to do in that time. So like we said, if you are taking the strategic approach and perhaps focusing on the business operations because you want to score high in your essay, then perhaps you would do the question 3, business operations, and then question 4, miscellaneous topics, because it deals with the business operations again. However, the way that I would recommend you choose which questions you're going to answer is go through the questions during the reading time and check the mark allocation and see if you are able to confidently answer them. What I mean by that is to not think of the two types of defensive strategies, but you know that when you're in a paper and you get a certain question, it's almost like, okay, I know the answer. You feel confident about answering, where other ones you immediately hit a blank. So figure out where, in which question, you will lose the most marks. So, for example, if I cannot name two types of defensive strategies, but I can do the rest of these, then I'm only losing 2 marks. Or let's say I can't do this for 2 marks and I don't feel like I can answer this, discuss the impact of the National Credit Act on businesses. So that's 8 marks that I am risking for loss in question 2. In question 3, say for example, I could answer all of these except the last one. Then I lose only 6 possible marks if I were to take this question. In this question, if the only thing I am not able to answer is perhaps here where they say the role of CETAs in supporting the Skills Development Act, then I only lose 4 marks. So the one where I'm going to lose the most amount of marks in, I'm not going to answer that one. So go that way, because oftentimes if you just go off which questions you can answer and not the mark allocation, you put yourself at risk because the questions don't all just count like 2 or 3 marks. The questions are weighted differently. So a 2-mark question is not the end of the world if you can't answer it. However, if you can't answer 3 6-mark questions, that's almost half of that question because the question is out of 40. So then you put yourself at risk. So also use your reading time to decide which ones you're going to answer. So I'm going to keep the paper open here on the business operations. So remember that the business operations topic is your human resources function and then your quality of performance. So when you're going through these questions, ask yourself, what topic is this talking about, to make sure that you're answering with the correct content, because it's not saying business operations, okay, I'm now asking on the human resources topic, I'm now asking on the quality of performance. So ask yourself, if you're struggling with the question, what topic is this part of, to narrow down the content that you need to give as the answer. So fringe benefits, they are part of the human resources function. And they say, name any 3 examples of fringe benefits. So going to the fringe benefits section here in the work, and then looking here, so remember last week we were chatting about the mark allocation and how you answer questions according to that mark allocation. So if they say give, identify, list, name, or state, it's 1 mark at the end of the phrase, 3 examples, 1 mark for each example. Similarly, here we have outlined the role of the interviewer before the interview. So we have outline, that's split marking, I believe here. It's 2 marks at the end of the statement. So that means you need to give 2 roles of the interviewer before the interview for 4 marks. You don't have to give 4 for 4 marks. So pay attention to this, because oftentimes what's quite a large concern for students is time in a business studies paper. And if you answer a question like too long, you're wasting precious time that you could have spent answering another question. So make sure that your answers are concise and according to the mark allocation. And make sure that you interpret the mark allocation correctly, because it's not like they will say here, give 2 roles of the interview before the interview. You should know that this means that the outline means that you get 2 marks at the end of a full fact, hence you only have to say 2. So what we're going to go over now is we'll see how far we can get, but I want to just go over the section here in which they chat about the human resources function, and then we'll try answer questions on it. So the human operation, or the human resource function, is made up of a couple of things. So what would be wise for studying this as well is perhaps making a mind map, calling it business operations human resource function in the middle, and then making each of these its own branch and writing underneath. So you have recruitment, you have induction, in selection, and then induction and placement, and then salary determination methods, fringe benefits and perks, and then the legislation. So those 7 things are what you need to know under the human resource function. So particularly for business studies, which is a content-heavy subject, and there's often a lot of things you need to remember under each, it can sometimes get confusing as to which content fits where. What I mean by that is you mistaking one positives or advantages for another concept, positives or advantages, or mixing up things, or forgetting where recruitment falls in. So in that case, a mind map is really helpful, and trying to make it on a singular page so that on one page you can visualize and see all the work that you need to know in the human resources function topic. So in recruitment, this is the first part. And the human resource function is responsible for the human capital of the business. If you see they're referring to human capital, it means the workers of the business. So if they ask you to explain or elaborate on the meaning of recruitment, you say the following. And note that when you're studying, you might get overwhelmed by the fact that here, look how many bullet points there are, or here there's 4 bullet points that you have to remember. Note that for questions or for items like this that have a lot of bullet points, it's not that you have to remember every single one. All of these words mean that you get 2 marks for a full statement. And the largest question they usually ask is around 6 or 8 marks. So that means that at maximum, you need to know 4. And you can get away with knowing 3. You'll see here the maximum marks is 6 in this paper. There is no 8 mark question. And all of these that are higher order marks will be 2 marks for one full fact. So, recruitment is the process used by the business to identify vacancies and attract suitable candidates for it. So, it aims at finding candidates who have the necessary knowledge, experience, and qualifications to fulfill the vacancy. And then the recruitment procedure. So, note that these are two different things. What I often see students messing up as well is in terms of your business environments, there's a section where they explain what the act makes provisions for and what the purpose of the act is. And students often confuse those. So note the wording of the heading as well. So this is the meaning of recruitment, and this is the procedure. So if they ask you for the recruitment procedure, do not discuss the meaning of recruitment. So also, if it is something like a procedure or something with steps, oftentimes the memo will stipulate that it doesn't have to be in order. So during the paper, don't spend too much time stressing about if your steps are in order or not, and spending too much time trying to order them. Rather, just move on. Most of the times, the memo is structured in such a way that the marker will accept it even if it isn't in order. So if they ask you to outline, discuss, or explain the recruitment procedure, you say the following things. The human resource manager should evaluate the job and prepare a job analysis, which includes the job specification and job description to identify recruitment needs. Also, with things like this, we have an outline, discuss, or explain. So what that means is that when they ask you a question, outline, discuss. So if it's discuss or explain here and they use split marking, you need to be sure that you remember the whole fact. So I'll show you what I mean by that, because oftentimes students will only remember half of the fact, maybe because they're trying to learn as a phrase or because it's just easier to remember. But with split marking, you get penalized or you lose a lot of marks if you don't give the whole fact. So an example, if they ask you to explain the recruitment procedure and you say human resource management should indicate the job specification. So in split marking, you would get 1 mark for saying this and the second mark for saying to attract suitable candidates. So if you leave out the to attract suitable candidates, you lose 1 whole mark. Choose a method of recruitment, for example, internal or external, 1 mark. To reach suitable candidates, 2nd mark. So do you see how with split marking, it's really important that you give the whole fact and not just remember it as a phrase. So external recruitment should be considered 1 mark. If internal recruitment was unsuccessful, there's your 2nd mark. So a job analysis, note that here they also spoke about a job specification and a job description. That is under a job analysis. So we have a job analysis, and then under the job analysis, you have 2 components, the job description and the job specification. The job analysis is where the human resource manager evaluates the job, and that includes the drafting of the job specification and job description in order to identify recruitment needs. Pay attention to this one, the job description and job specification, because they like to ask it almost in this exact table. So just generally, this is a very well-liked question to ask. It's been in previous ones as well. So just knowing the difference, usually how they would ask this is it's not that you have to remember all 3 because that would mean it's a 12-mark question. Try and remember just the 2. So describes the duties or responsibilities of the job. Job description describes. Job specification specifies the minimum acceptable personal qualities, skills, and qualifications needed for the job. So when they tell you to differentiate or distinguish between a job description and job specification as a component of job analysis, you say these things. A job description is a written description of the job and its requirements. A job specification is a written description of the specific qualifications needed. Okay, so an example from the 2019 past paper. So they give you a little scenario and then they want you to quote examples. So this is an application example question. If they ask you to just differentiate between the two, this is more of a content regurgitation question. And in this case, if they want you to identify it from given scenarios, it's more like a contextual question. So Khan Privat Hospital. Khan Private Hospital has advertised a vacancy for a nurse. The advertisement includes the following aspects regarding the position. So, applicants must have a diploma in nursing as a minimum requirement, responsible for observing patients and giving medication. 2 years of experience will be an advantage, compiling daily reports on the progress. The advertisement indicates that only shortlisted candidates will be contacted. Quote 2 examples of job description and 2 examples of job specification. So again, I cannot stress how important it is. If it says quote, you need to say word for word from the text. You throw away marks if you put it in your own words because you can't get the marks. The question is asking you to quote. So remember we said a job description describes the duties or responsibilities of the job. It's a written description of the job and its performances. So job title, working conditions, relationship of the job. A job specification specifies the minimum acceptable personal qualities or skills and qualifications needed. So for our job description, we want things that describe the position. What do you do? So what must you have? This would be a specification, right? So we'll do the specifications in purple. Then they say responsible for observing patients and giving medication. That's your what. So what do you do on the job, not what must you have. So we'll make that in pink. 2 years experience in nursing will be an advantage. So that would also be your specification because it specifies the minimum acceptable personal qualities, skills, and qualifications needed. And then this again tells you what the job does. It describes what you do. You compile daily reports on the progress of patients. Okay, so while this one is what do you do, this is what do you need to do this. So in terms of methods of recruitment, they also like to ask this internal and external recruitment. External as in outside. Okay, internal as in inside. So note that when they ask you to analyze the impact, it means you could give positives and or negatives. So you can give positives and you can give negatives, or you can only give positives or only give negatives. So for this types of questions, I would try remember like 3 or 4 points under each. So external recruitment is where the business recruits from outside the business. So these are things like recruitment agencies, hiring someone new and bringing them into the business. Internal recruitment is where you recruit people from inside the business. For example, you promote someone to a position. So now let's look at if we were to take this information and apply it. So in our fringe benefits, we already did that one. I'm going to skip the role of the interview. I'm going to go here with the method of recruitment to show you guys how you would answer this. So identify the method of recruitment used by MC. Motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario above. So MAPS Computers. MAPS Computers specialize in the manufacturing of computers. They advertised a vacancy for a project manager on their business notice board. So a little hack for the scenarios. Usually the first sentence provides context and the rest of the sentence is where you will find your answer. This is not always the case, but is the case most of the times. So if they put it on their business notice board, right, that's inside their business. So that would be internal. So you will say internal recruitment, and then you will quote and write down word for word MC advertised a vacancy for a project manager on their business notice board. Okay, do not just write MC advertised a project for a vacancy, advertised a vacancy for a project manager, because that could be internal or external. To be safe, always write down the whole sentence in which you think the answer appears. So it says, or how the mark allocation is for this then, is you get 2 marks for identifying the method of recruitment and 1 mark for quoting. If you wrongly identified the method of recruitment, generally they won't award you the mark for quoting, even if that was correct. So here, method of recruitment, internal recruitment, and you will see it says here, do not award marks for the motivation if the method of recruitment was incorrectly identified. So we have an explain question. So explain the advantages of the method of recruitment identified in question 3.3.1 for business. Okay, so again, when you're going through your reading time, note that there are questions like this that are contingent on the one before. So if you cannot answer 3.3.1, you risk your 3.3.2, because for your 3.3.2 to be correct, you should have been able, your method of recruitment you identified must be the internal one. So this question's answer is dependent on the one above. So make sure that you factor that in when deciding which question you want to answer. So note that it's an explain question. So that means that we apply split marking. It's for 4 marks. That means we should give 2 advantages of internal recruitment. Okay. So what I want to point out is, look, it says cheaper or quicker to fill 1 mark the post, 2nd mark. So with the split marking, it doesn't always make sense how they split the phrasing. So that's why it's important for you to remember the whole fact. So provides opportunities for career paths, 1 mark within the business. There's your 2nd mark. So you need to give the full fact to get all the marks. And oftentimes what students will do is they will say something like, reduces the chances of losing employees, then go on to the next one. Detailed, reliable information can be obtained. In that case, then you need to give 4 advantages because you're not giving the full fact. But that's particularly a tricky slope or slippery slope when, if a question says give 4 reasons and or explain 4 reasons and it's split marking, then the marker is not allowed to mark past your 4th reason. For 8 marks, then you lose half of them because you didn't say it in full sentences and gave the full fact. So make sure you give the full fact. Note also here, so here we have the positives of internal recruitment. Cheaper and quicker to fill the post. Provides opportunities for career paths within the business. This aligns word for word with the memo. Okay, cheaper, quicker to fill the post. Provides opportunities for career paths within the business. Placement is easy. Placement is easy. So this is why I'm saying these notes are so valuable, is because they come from the memos of papers. These are the answers word for word. So all you need to do is you need to memorize, if I get this question, I need to give these answers. So these notes are really helpful because they give you the way that you should write the answers in the business paper. And because business is technical with the wording that they use, they want you to know the business terms and in how the paper is assessed. You want to get your answer as close to the memo as possible because it leaves little room for interpretation. As such, it would be in your best interest to use these notes rather than like a full textbook, because it just bullet points it here and it gives you an example of, if you get this question, this is the answer you should give. They also like to ask examples of recruitment. So make sure that you know, like, at least, let's say, 3 or 4 of these for each. So I don't want to waste too much time going over this, but I hope you see how what I was trying to illustrate by doing this is how you use the content to then answer a question in the paper, and how you combine the analysis of the action word, the mark allocation, and the content you're studying to answer that question. So what I would recommend for studying is to sit with your notes, and then with the past paper and the memo, and then try answer the question, or go through your notes, then try answer the questions on the human resource function section, and then go through the memo and see where your answers deviate and try get them as close to the memo as possible. That way, you're not only passively going over the content, but you're actively memorizing it and practicing it as well. I cannot stress the importance of past papers enough. They are so, so, so helpful. So for your NSC exam, really do at least, like I would say, like four for past papers. Note that you want to do the earlier or the more recent past papers. So you can look at the November exams, and then you can also look at the May, June NSC exams that happen mid-year. So what I want to look at now for the last 20 minutes is the business operations question. Also then on human resources, because that's what we're going through. So I have an example here. Okay, so we have a essay question as an example. So this comes from one of the past papers as well. So what they do is they don't give you the mark allocation for each point. They just have it like this, 40. So you don't know where the 40 is made up of. So it says Fruity Juices. Yaku is the human resources manager of Fruity Juices. He is responsible for recruitment and interviewing prospective candidates for vacant posts at Fruity Juices. The management prepares employment contracts which comply with the legal requirements for the selected candidate. Fruity Juices has to make appointments within the confines of the EEA. Okay, so now they say write an essay on the human resources function in which you address the following aspects. You must outline the recruitment procedure, describe the role of the interviewer during the interview, explain the legal requirements of the employment contract, and advise FJ on the implications of the Employment Equity Act on the human resources function. So why I also want to focus on the essay question is note that in a 150 mark paper, it counts 40 marks. And oftentimes students will either score really well on their essay or they will score really low. So it's really important that you give enough information to get the full amount of marks in your essay. And I think oftentimes students find it a bit daunting because you just have these prompts and now you need to write something for 40 marks on that. So we're going to break it down. So they want you to outline the recruitment procedure. And then note that here they use the action verbs as well. So pick up where they will apply split marking. So you will remember that last week, I will go back to that, when we went over how you write a business essay. When we were paying attention to the headings, we said that all you do to get the heading is you remove the action verb. So I've gone and underlined them here. So your first heading in your body, not your introduction. Remember, you have the heading introduction first and then your introduction. Then the heading thereafter will be the recruitment procedure. The following will be the role of the interviewer during the interview, the legal requirements of the employment contract, implications of the Employment Equity Act on the human resources function. So all I've done is I've just taken away the action verb here to give me the subheadings. So remember, your analysis mark is for you following the subheadings that they've laid out for you. For your synthesis mark, for the FLASO that we spoke about, do not include information that they haven't asked for. If they ask you to discuss only these components, do not speak about the political component then of the macro environment. So for our introduction, remember we need to give 2 general facts of 1 mark each. So we write introduction, and then we give 2 general facts. So how this is different from any other introduction, I think that's why students struggle with the introduction and conclusion, is usually in an introduction, you're told to state your point, give context, and say what you're going to be talking about. In a business essay, if you do that, you don't get marks for your introduction. You need to give facts. You don't have to say what you're going to talk about. You just have to say 2 general facts. So your general facts, if you're wondering what they will be about, it will be about any of these things: the recruitment procedure, role of the interviewer, legal requirements, or implications. Any general facts on those? So the objective of recruitment is to attract the best possible candidates with the required skills, qualification, competency, and vacancies. You get 1 mark. And then we give another one for another general fact. Reliable recruitment procedures and systems should be in place that businesses achieve their goals. And then for your introduction, like we said last week, it would be your 2 times 1. So you need to give 2 facts for 2 marks in the introduction only. Then our first heading would be the recruitment procedure. So again, look how closely this aligns to the memo. Here, so we went over this in the beginning on page 1. So the recruitment procedure. So the human resource manager should evaluate the job, prepare a job analysis that includes the job specification, job description, in order to meet the or identify recruitment needs. Okay, so use this, and also this is the memo. So do you understand how if you don't use the terms that they give here, like recruitment, job description, you lose marks because they want you to say specific things. So there isn't that much room for interpretation. And then remember, often students forget, you need to include 2 practical examples. So I've done one here. And that's really only what the scenario is really helpful for, is using it to illustrate your practical examples. So we said here that if internal recruitment is unsuccessful, external recruitment should be considered, and then you go and you underline your example and you write for example, so that the marker can see that you have an example here, because they just go through your paper and look for 2 examples for the O originality mark. So for example, you could use a recruitment agency. So I gave an example of external recruitment there. Then our next heading, the role of the interviewer during the interview. Okay, so allocate the same amount of time to each candidate, introduce members of the interviewing panel to each candidate, make each interviewee feel at ease. So make the interviewee feel at ease, explain the purpose of the interview, record interviewees' responses for future use. And then I've added my second example here. Always indicate it by saying, for example, or writing e.g. and then underlining it. So avoid discriminatory, controversial types of questions. For example, asking a female candidate about family planning or having children. And then the legal requirements of an employment contract. So that's at the end here, legal requirements of the employment contract. The employer and employee must both sign them. Employer and employee must agree to any changes. No party may unilaterally change aspects of the employment contract. So here, employer must agree to any changes. The aspects can be renegotiated. No party may unilaterally change them. And both people must sign to the contract. And then the same thing here. So This is at the end. Don't get this confused with the business environments legislation. This is still in the human resources function. It's the last part where they talk about the implication of labor legislation. So it would be this here. And you will see that the memo reflects that exactly. So the human resource manager must promote or provide equal opportunity. Sorry, it's the Employment Equity Act. Um, yeah, 1 second. So I'm not going to find it now because I'm scared I'm going to run out of time looking for it. But human resource manager provide equal opportunities, ensure that affirmative action promotes diversity, compile employment equity plans. And then again, in your conclusion, you give one general fact. Note that in your introduction, you need to give 2 general facts for 2 marks. In your conclusion, you need to give one general fact for 2 marks because the marking allocation looks like this. It's 1 times 2 gives you 2. So this essay gets full marks in terms of the lasso because our layout is correct. We've used the headings that appear in the paper. We've only answered the questions that were given to us, so we get the synthesis mark, and then we added 2 examples, so we get our originality mark. Oftentimes, it's not that your essay would have to say all of these things, all of these points. So I'll show you. Let's take an example here from the paper 1. So here on the human resources function, so like I said, they really like to ask the job description and the job specification. So note that they have maxes under each question. I'll pull up the paper as well so that you guys aren't too confused. So we have an essay question here that says, write an essay on the human resources function in which you include the following human resource activities. Outline the difference between a job description and specification. Discuss the impact of internal recruitment on a business. Explain the role of the interviewee during the interview. Advise businesses on the legal requirements of the employment contract. Do you see how they're quite similar in what they ask? The other one was also asking about external recruitment and was asking about the interviewer as well. So there's only so much you can ask under the human resources function and under the business operations function. It's a lot easier to narrow it down than the business environments. So with this, note that here they don't give you the sub-maxes for each question, but it's a maximum of 40 marks. For your F mark of the FLASO, the actual fact mark, it's out of 32. And for one full fact gets 2 marks, so you need to give 16 full facts. Okay. So in case of this, you get a submax of 4, so you could give a maximum of 2 under job description and a maximum of 2 under job specification. So it has a maximum, meaning if you said all 3 of these on each side, you wouldn't get 12, you would get 8 because you cannot exceed the maximum. Similarly, here you have a maximum of 14 because it's asking you for the positives and the negatives. You usually get a sub-max as well for questions like this. So role of the interviewee during the interview, a max of 14 with the split marking, that means 7 facts. However, if you tally up all these maximums, they come up to much more than 32. So it's not that you need to say 7 facts on the role of the interviewee during the interview. You would be fine just saying, like, let's say 4 to get 8 marks. Let's say here you also said, let's say you said 5, so you get 10 marks, 15 marks. You get these 8 marks. You already have 23, 25 legal requirements of the employment contract. There's your other ones. Okay, so it's not that you have to fulfill the maximums of each. just try make sure generally, if you look at mark allocation, this max 14 is not too common. You'll see that in the other ones, it's usually like a maximum of 12. So here in this question on quality of performance, still business operations. So here you have an 8 mark question, submax 8 quality indicators for the purchasing function. So you could give a maximum of 4 facts, a maximum of 4 facts, a maximum of 6 facts, 3 positives, 3 negatives. Here, maximum of 5. So I would recommend for your, when you're studying for your essay, try remember 4 bullet points under each. Um, it's not that you have to say everything. Don't spend time trying to remember every single bullet point, because the chances are it's not that they will ask you to write down every single one. And in any case, there's usually a max to those questions. So, yeah. Cool. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that you see how the questions are asked in terms of the essay, because I feel like because the section B is made up of multiple questions, if you mess up on one question, you can move to the next one and you're still able to keep the marks. However, because the essay question is just one big essay, if you mess up the essay, you risk the whole 40 marks. It's not that the marks are split up that much. The whole essay is on the human resources function. Okay, so make sure you study very well for your essay questions. Try remember around 4 bullet points under each, and please, please, please go over the layout for the essay questions. And then, yeah, I would recommend to try study the business operations very thoroughly and study the business environments thoroughly. That would be my closing recommendation for the paper one.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for a very informative session, and all the best. We look forward to the next session tomorrow at 3 p.m. So, to our viewers, good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.